Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us for youth group online tonight. I know it looks a little different, it looks a little weird, but again, thank you for joining us, and I hope that we can get back together in person soon. So, this evening, I want to just take a few minutes talking about the future and how we can step into that with God. Over the last few weeks on Sunday morning, Pastor Dave and Pastor Dan have been talking about the land in between that the Israelites travel through and how God meets them and provides for them in the midst of it. And so I want to focus on a few passages from Exodus tonight where the Israelites are traveling through the desert, the Yeshimon, or the land in between, and how God provides for them when they don't know necessarily what their future looks like. They're a little scared about what's in front of them, and God speaks into their worry and shows that He will provide. So our first passage tonight comes from Exodus 13:21, and it says this: By the day the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. And I want to skip forward a few passages to Exodus 16:21. The Israelites here, they're kind of grumbling about what they're going to eat. They're in this land in between. They don't know what their future, they don't know what their next meal is going to look like. And so they start to grumble and complain, and God hears them, and He says this to Moses. The Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them at twilight you will eat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. And I think this is kind of a funny passage. We've all been there where like we've grumbled to our parents or our friends or maybe our girlfriend or wife or something like that, and finally they give in. And they're like, okay, okay, okay. Or like for me and Charlie, like I hear her crying or grumbling. I'm like, okay, something's wrong. What do I need to do? Okay, maybe now I have to feed you. And it's just kind of this funny picture where God hears His children, the Israelites grumbling. He's like, okay, okay, I'll give in. Here you go. Here's some food. And I think that's a funny image, but that's not necessarily what I want to talk tonight about. I want to talk a little bit about the future. You see, I was scrolling on Instagram the other day, and I came across a Christmas countdown clock and realized that there are less than 100 days till Christmas. And when I read that, my heart kind of skipped a beat. I got both a little excited and also a little nervous at the same time. You see, my mind kind of started to drift to the future. And I was like, what is Christmas going to look like this year in the midst of this weird season that we find ourselves in during COVID? Like, are we going to be able to go out and shop like normal? Are we going to be able to get photos with Santa or go ice skating? Or is there going to be Black Friday shopping? I'm not a Black Friday shopper, but I know a lot of people enjoy doing that. Are people going to be able to go see their families that may live in different states or different countries? And there's so much kind of like wonder and thought of what the future may hold. And that's not only about Christmas. I know some of those things with Christmas are trivial, like the shopping and the pictures, but a lot of them are big things, like seeing our family. And the future is unclear right now. And not just relating to Christmas, but the future is unclear for a lot of things. And I think when we start looking towards that, that can get a little scary. It can get a little weird. We can kind of feel disoriented. We don't know necessarily what our senior years are going to look like, what college we might go to, what our sports seasons might look like, what school is going to look like. There's so much about this future that is unknown to us. And when we focus on us, I do think like we can get a little overwhelmed. And so as I was kind of thinking about this and a little freaked out, I thought about one of my favorite Christmas movies. It's Santa Claus is Coming to Town. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a little bit older of a movie. And if you haven't, I know it's October, but it's never too early to start watching Christmas movies. So I encourage you to maybe watch that tonight, or maybe watch one of your other favorite Christmas movies. But in this movie, there's a scene where Kris Kringle is talking to the Winter Warlock. The Winter Warlock is kind of the villain in this movie. He's kind of been a bad dude for most of his life, but he wants to change. He wants to start on a new path in life. But the Winter Warlock is very concerned about how to begin or where this path will lead in the future and what the changes in his life will look like. And so Kris Kringle's kind of having this conversation with him, trying to comfort him, and he teaches this song to him. I'm not going to sing it for you. I'm a horrible, horrible singer, but if you want to listen to it, you can look it up on YouTube. But the song says this: put one foot in front of the other, and soon you'll be walking out the door. He's encouraging the Winter Warlock to simply take it one step at a time. Because Kris Kringle knows that if the Warlock simply focuses on only the future and what may happen, it can get a little overwhelming. I think for many of us, we kind of spend a lot of time here thinking about the future, thinking about what's ahead of us and what may happen. And I don't think there's anything necessarily super wrong with that. It can be really good to plan ahead. I'm definitely a planner. I like to know what's in front of me. However, the future is also very hard to predict. And I think that unknown can cause some stress and anxiety. Sometimes when we try to figure out what the future holds or understand what God is doing, I think it can often make us feel frustrated, angry, confused. Now, I know we can always do our best to plan and prepare for things, but if COVID's taught us anything, things can often change in an instant. And when that happens, I think we kind of can sometimes get a little scared. But I think the best thing we can do is to simply be present in that moment. Chris Kringle says, just put one foot in front of the other. Do what you can do today. Take it step by step and see where that gets you. Right? If we spend time constantly worrying about what may happen or what the future may hold, we may miss the very thing that God is doing and how he is working in the steps and lessons that he's teaching us today. You see, when the Israelites were traveling through the wilderness for 40 years, God asked them to be present, to place their trust fully in him and take it each day by day and take it step by step. You see, the desert that Israelites traveled through in Exodus is described as the Yeshimon. And Yeshimon in Hebrew means uninhabitable. It's a place that nothing could survive. There was nothing that grew in that desert. There were very few sources of water. There were no trees for shelter. No animals would actually go into that place because there's nothing for them to eat, so there's no meat to hunt or anything. People never went into that desert. Oftentimes, actually, people would send their prisoners to that desert and say, go figure it out for yourselves. So it's obvious to see why the Israelites are a little concerned, a little wondering and worrying about what God's leading them to and what their future may hold in this uninhabitable place. God, why are you sending us here? Right? Because the only way that they could survive in that environment was by fully relying on God to provide for them. And I think that's what God wanted to show them. That yes, I know this place is difficult. I know this place is uninhabitable. I know you may not understand or know that your strength can get you through it, but I can. And so God provided them a pillar of cloud and fire to guide them each day in a desert where nothing can grow. It's very easy to get off the path, to walk in the wrong direction. And so God provided them direction to keep them on the path that they were called to walk. And I think God does that in our own lives as well. He might not provide a pillar of cloud and fire, but when we're going through those Yeshimon experiences on our own life, the deserts in our own life, I believe that God provides us direction. He provides us a path, and he says, stay on this, follow me, and I will lead you out of it. And now God didn't only provide them a path to go, God also provided them with the food that they needed each day, and he encouraged them to focus on being present. You see, he didn't provide them with more food than they needed. He provided them with exactly what they needed each day. He wanted them to not think about the next day because he knew that focusing on 40 years in the future may have been a little overwhelming. So he encouraged them to just be present each moment in that day. God showed them each day that he would provide, and when they finally arrived at the promised land, this next journey, this next huge step in their life, I think God was trying to show them that they could look back at the past and see how God took care of them. Right? Sometimes when we get to that new journey, that new place in our lives, it's really scary to jump into that. And I think sometimes we forget, actually. It's much easier to forget how God took care of us when we're going into a new place. And so what I think God is showing to the Israelites is he's calling them to remember how he took care of them in that desert land, in that uninhabitable place. That's a really hard word to say. And so that they could see that the same God who took care of them there was going to be the same God who would take care of them day by day and step by step in the future as they walked into this next journey. One of my favorite pastors and teachers, Brad Gray, says this, that as followers of Christ, we can walk backwards step by step into the future with confidence. I think that's an important thing for us as humans to remember, because so often I think we focus on the future and what's in front of us. And I think that it gets overwhelming and challenging. And sometimes even when our sole focus on the future, it can be scary to step forward into it. I think what that statement challenges us to do is actually turn around and focus on our past instead of our future. To remember all of the ways that God has provided and met us in the difficult times and challenging things we faced. To remember the lessons we learned, to remember how God used it for good, and that when we're facing the next step, the next difficult thing in the future, we can know that the same God who took care of us in the past will be the same God who will take care of us in the future. And because we know that our God is for us, He is with us, He will never leave us, we can take that next thing on and walk backwards into the future, knowing that this God will be the same one that's in front of us. Now, I know there's a fine line with that, because I'm not trying to say that we hold on to our past and we never move forward. Rather, I think what we need to do is we let the way that God worked in our past give us confidence to move forward in our future. And I know that's not always easy, because as humans, we often let our past sometimes prevent our future. There was a study done a few years ago by Cambridge University that showed that as humans, we remember the mistakes and difficult things that we go through in our lives much more than our accomplishments and our successes. And the same thing, when we do the same thing to other people, we hold them their mistakes and their failures rather than allow them to move forward. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this, but sometimes kids have these nicknames from one mistake they made in elementary school, and it goes with them through their whole life. Our mind and our culture remembers failures and dark times much easier than anything else. And I think in those times, we remember the difficult time, but we forget how God met us in the difficult time. And so if that's where our mind goes, I think we need to reframe how we remember those things so that they can enable us to walk confidently into the future. One of my favorite themes throughout the Old Testament that God uses is this idea, this phrase, remember, remember, remember. It's often used when people are going through a difficult time or they've made a mistake and they don't know how to take that next step forward. And what God is saying to them as they're going through this thing is to remember who you are and remember whose you are. So often I think we let our mistakes and our failures ruin our confidence, sometimes make us feel unworthy or even frighten us to try something new in the future. Or we avoid certain paths or things because of a difficult place we've had to travel through in life or pain that we felt. And what I think it's important for us to do is to not let our past prevent who God is calling us to be in the future. We don't want our past to define our future, but rather we let our past and how God met us in it give us strength to move forward into the future. I don't think God created us to be drawn to the difficult times and failures of our lives. But I believe that He knew in a broken world that would be something that we struggle with. And I think that's why there's this theme of remember, remember, remember. So that when those failures, those mistakes, those struggling places do come forefront to our mind, we don't just remember them. We don't forget how God was active in them. We remember how God was active in them. We remember how God met us, how He redeemed us, how He taught us, how He provided, right? We first remember how He met us. The second part is we remember who we are, that we are a child of God, that we are loved, that there's nothing that we can ever do to make God love us any less, that our mistakes or our accomplishments do not define us, that we are all uniquely gifted and created and called to be a reflection of who God is in our lives, and that we are called to reflect God's love for all people in everything we do. That's the second. We remember who we are. And the third is we remember whose we are. That we are a child of God, that God has created us, that we are His, that He will be with us, that He will take care of us, that He will strengthen us, that He will never leave us, and He will also step with us as we walk into the future. So when we go through those difficult times, when we remember those difficult times, let's not forget who God is. Let's remember, remember, remember. Let's remember how He met us. Let's remember who we are, and let's remember whose we are. And I think that'll help us walk confidently backwards into the future. My challenge for us as we leave tonight is that we don't focus on what may happen, but we take it one step at a time. We focus on one positive step that we can make each day and remember how God has met us in the past, but also how God is meeting you in the moment right now. I'm reminded of a quote from Bob Goff that says, "Do not worry about what may or may not happen, but stick by our God and trust that He will work it all out in the end." Friends, I hope that's helpful for you tonight. I hope that you can step into the future knowing that God, the same God who was with you in the past, will be the God that is with you and the next challenge that you walk into. Remember who you are and whose you are. Friends, go play our game. We got a fun video scavenger hunt, chance to win a gift card to a place of your choice. You can play by yourself or with your small group or with a group of friends. But I hope you enjoy that, and I can't wait to see you again. See you, everybody.